The subject for today is Satan is out to get our children, and he definitely is. And what we're going to be going over in the book of Daniel is about Nebuchadnezzar and how he took the children of Israel captive and took them to Babylon. And Babylon is a kind of a view of the world, or depiction of the world. And I guess if you would depict Babylon as a world, then you would have to depict the leader of Babylon as pretty much Satan. So what he is wanting to do here is Nebuchadnezzar is wanting to use all the handsome and very well-educated young men, wants to take these teenagers while they're young and impressionable and desensitize them from their lifestyle and their world, and change their lifestyles into the lifestyle of the Babylonian lifestyle. And that's what the devil wants to do with our children today, is he wants to take our children out of our homes, out of the care of the church, and teach them things that are not of God, and desensitize them to the point that they question the Bible. They question God's Word. They question what they've been taught at home about God. And we're going to look at how this correlates with this, how these verses correlate with that. And what I want you to think about is, are we as parents, are we being our best? Are we not only teaching and preaching God's Word to our children, but are we practicing what we're preaching in front of our kids? Because you know that no matter what you teach, they are going to follow after your footsteps. Here we go. Let's read chapter 1, verses 3 through 5 first. And it says here, "Then the king commanded Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and of nobility, Israel, both of royal and nobility, and the youths without blemish, of good appearance and skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding, learning, and competent to stand in the king's palace, and to teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. The king assigned them a daily portion of the food that the king ate, and of the wine that the king drank, that they would be educated for 3 years, and at the end of the time they were to stand before the king." So right here we show here that these children were very, very intelligent. Kind of makes you think about how a lot of our teenagers, when they left high school, have went and gone to college. And these professors have plugged in a lot of evolution and Darwinism and different things like that to our children. And our teenagers and our young, impressionable children started to question, and they have maybe even left the faith and have gone after the things of this world. Because right here, it specifically says, the king commanded Ashpenaz, the chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and the nobility, youths without blemish, of good appearance and skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge. So these weren't just children that, were poor and didn't have anything. These were kids that had the best of everything. They were given the ability to learn from all kinds of the scientific and the theologians of the day. They were given all kinds of different abilities to learn, and given everything that they could, the possibilities of learning these wonderful things. And so the king knew who he was getting. He knew he wasn't getting anything except for the cream of the crop. And he knew that if he could get them and turn them around into learning the ways of the Chaldeans, the Babylonian ways, then he has accomplished a lot. He can desensitize the whole entire land of Israel into their thinking and their ways of life. If he could get a hold of the young, impressionable youth, then he can filtrate them into other areas, and they can teach the Israelites until eventually the Jewish way of life is extinct. Isn't that how the devil works today? Is he's wanting to stomp out the Christian faith any way he can possibly do it. All the way from the presidents changing the way that husband and wife should marry, all the way down to children being taught that they have two mommies or two daddies. I mean, it comes from the top all the way down to the bottom. So we have to be very careful of what we allow our children to see, what we allow our children to do, where our children go to, and what they see on television. Because that right there is so impressionable. You can allow so many things in your home from the internet and from the television set. I mean, everything possible known to man can come into your household now. And the days of being sheltered are pretty much gone because the internet is here. And the world is in our backyard. We want to go over chapter 1 and go over verses 8 through 16. And it says, but Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food. Not only were they wanting to teach them, they wanted about their ways of life. They wanted them to completely, start drinking alcohol and eating things that wasn't right. I mean, that's how the world is today. They want to get our teenagers drunk and get them, buying alcohol and wine, and the devil himself wants them to get stuck with drugs. And if he can get their whole entire testimony slaughtered by having a alcoholic druggie, then he knows that he can kill the whole entire Christian faith if he can get the youth doing that. And that's what here. He wanted them to start going away from their beliefs in eating different things and drinking different things. But Daniel didn't want to do that. He says, but Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Therefore, he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. And God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who assigned your food and drink. For why should he see that you were in worse condition than the youths who are of your own age? So here he is, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel, the Hebrew children, and Daniel, these three that we know of. They are here, and they have decided not to do the things that all the other Israelite or Jewish teens were doing. These teens were brought with Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It wasn't just the four of them that were brought to King Nebuchadnezzar. It was a bunch of them. So these other teenagers decided to go with the way of the world. They decided to do the things that the world was showing them to do. But Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego decided not to. And we find here that later on that they were better looking and better health than the others. So they took away all the food and the drink, and gave all the Hebrew children, every one of them, all the Israelite youth, the same food and drink that Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were eating and drinking. And he says, I fear my lord the king, who assigned your food and drink. For why should he see that you were in worse condition than the youths who are your own age? So you would endanger my head with the king. Then Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had assigned over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Now, these were also given the new names of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That was their Jewish names. Daniel's new name was Belteshazzar. Now keep that in mind, because if you read the book of Daniel later on, you'll find Belshazzar. Now Belshazzar is Nebuchadnezzar's either his son or his grandson. But Belteshazzar with a T is Daniel. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And it says, test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables and eat the water, and eat and water to drink. Then who eat the king's food be observed by you, and deal with your servants according to what you see. So he listened to them in this matter and tested them for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, it was seen that they were better in appearance and fatter in flesh than the youths who ate the king's food. So the steward took away the food and the wine that were to drink and gave them vegetables. So, as I just mentioned, that's exactly what happened. So, what we want to kind of go over here is that our children can stand on the principles we have taught them. Whenever they leave our home, they can stand there on those principles, or they can either leave those principles. It is their decision. After they leave home, it is their decision what they do. But it is our job, parents. It is our job to shelter our children from the ways of the world. It is our job to teach them right from wrong. And are we parents? Are we teaching our children the ways of God? Or are we teaching them the ways of the world? We will stand accountable of what they do at home. But also we will be held accountable of what we teach them. Not only what we teach them, but what we do ourselves. Because it is not good enough just to teach. But we have to practice what we preach, parents. They have to see it. They have to see with themselves, see that for themselves what we do and what we say